Steve?
Okay. All right. Good evening. The hour has struck. I'd like to call to order the joint meeting of the Norwich Public Utilities Board of Commissioners and the Sewer Authority for Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023. In order to effectively run the meeting, for all those joining us either by telephone or WebEx, I'd ask you to mute your devices when you're not speaking, and when you do speak, please state your name for clarity of the record. Agenda item 2 is a Countryside Drive water assessment public hearing. Before we take any public comments on that, I'll have a brief presentation of the project, provide an overview of the benefits and the timeline for this important work. Chris, who shall we hear from?
Meredith Richling is our project manager for this project, and she'll lead us off with an overview. And then Mike Andrea is our bond counsel, and Mike will go over the whole assessment process. And also, you know, we haven't done one of these in a little while, so it'll be a little bit of an assessment 101, how it's done.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Lou Richland. I'm the project manager for Countryside Water Extension Program. In doing so, what we looked for was the existing properties around a 70-year-old well system that was combined in order to connect into the Canterbury main. Those existing water, about 1,200 feet north of Sunrise Street, to the intersection of Waller Lane and the intersection of Canterbury. So running down here, the well area was up around number 27, and that was the current well. And we ran 17 properties throughout that area. In doing so, you know, timeline. This began in 2019. Countryside Association contacted Norwich Public Utilities to say, what can we do to help us with our well situation? They had, as we said, 70 years of an old deteriorating well that connected 17 customers that now they had contamination issues, as well as breakage in their lines across the Lawler, Canterbury, and Evergreen. Fourth quarter, we went to bid, and there was a delay between 2019 and 2021 due to trying to get the appropriate funds to support this initiative to make it available to all the community. In fourth quarter 2022, the construction is completed, and we're doing our loan closing in March, or we did it in March. Next slide. The total project cost was $768,000. Of that $768,000, we acquired approximately $637,000 in grants. Those grants were broken up into two. One was a wind grant of $288,000 approximately, and that wind grant was broken into two communities, Norwich, and there was another community in the, what region was that? I don't remember exactly, another region. And they broke that into, based on the number of customers that would connect from well systems into community utilities. The second piece was a 50% grant eligible of $350,000. So in doing so, that left a loan payment of approximately $130,000. 83% loan and 17%, 83% grant, 17% loan. And to make it affordable, the assessment amount came out to $2,800 per customer. Now, normally that $2,800 is our normal service, or it would connect normal service fees for the customer to connect into a main line. In all of this, DPH was a huge opponent of trying to acquire these funds, so it was affordable to the community. And I'd like to thank Val Kent as well for all of her support in the financial arena, because it was very complicated. Any questions?
I have a couple. So the property to the east on Sunrise and Melbourne, are those certified on-site wells or they are? Is there any opportunity to possibly pick those up at any point in time or?
If they choose to connect, they can connect.
Correct, from those mains.
So the line is in the street then?
Yes.
Okay.
The original line was between the property and the backyards of the properties, so we put it in the street.
Okay, and so the lateral lines to each property are the same? Did you have to put new laterals in?
All new laterals.
All new laterals, so they're up to date, no problem with the lateral?
Yeah.
That's all, okay. Good. All
We
right.
also had to do some interior plumbing if we had to move those laterals due to the new codes with their septic systems as well.
So the water stopped in the street, everything was covered by this?
Everything was covered, including typically the customer owns from the main
Right.
into the house. We were able to get everything covered all the way into the house with this project.
And so there weren't any funds from DPH?
That was the 84%.
That's-
Okay. Oh,
So
all right.
2 grants that they administered.
2 grants.
Okay, good. Oh,
So maybe I wasn't clear in there, it was 2
Yeah.
grants. Now, the approximate was around it will come out to about $17, less than $17 a month for each customer. They can pay either, monthly, or they can pay all of that at one time. But normally, as we said, that $2,800 usually covers a person just connecting into our mains, not the whole entire project. So we ran quite a bit of main and quite a bit of services, as well as, you very rarely see 83% grant.
Before this time period, typically we were seeing between 6 and 30% grant.
Correct.
And now we're seeing higher percentages, but this is the first one we've ever seen this high. And it was really getting rid of a community well, which the Department of Health really is trying to minimize those wells. So that was something that was.
We want these people safe drinking water at this pressure, and you should be thankful for such a.
Okay.
It was, and we had COVID in between as well, so there was a few challenges, especially trying to make it affordable. Because, coming up with, close to $700,000, $800,000 is a lot of money for, a smaller community.
I have a quick, I don't know if I should wait until.
Mike's gonna be talking about the bonds and the assessments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
Mike, would you care to enlighten us on the assessment process?
Sure. I don't have any handouts, so.
You can probably.
Good evening, I'm Mike Andriana, I'm a partner at Coleman & Conley and NPU Bond Counsel. So a few things that I point out and touched on in this presentation was that this grant amount is extraordinary. I've probably done hundreds of these clean water fund financings, and the most I've ever seen is like 50%. To get up into the 80s is exceptional. And I think, as Chris pointed out, it was desire to get rid of this antiquated community water system that DPH wanted to do. So that was terrific. One other thing I'd point out is the $130,000, the loan that's you were left with. That loan is a 20-year loan at 2% of the state, so that's a good deal too. Just to give you a little background on the assessment, this was a fairly long process. It actually started with the city ordinance that was brought and approved by the council. We went back twice, back in 20 and 21, particularly for this assessment, because there were some unique things about this assessment in the sense that, you know, we wanted to make sure it was affordable to the property owners. So there was a cap, this $2,800 was a cap on the assessment that was built right into the ordinance. It was also, because it was unique in that NPU was actually running the service lines from the property line into the houses, we ended up entering into agreements with all the property owners, basically giving NPU the right to enter the property to install that service line and everything. So at the end of the day, as I said, we have this $2,800 assessment per property. The assessment payments are tied into or kind of consistent with NPU's payments on the project loan obligation loan with the state of Connecticut. The payments will start, I believe, in October of this year, and it's 2% interest on the assessment, just as it is on NPU's loan. Property owners do have the ability to prepay the full $2,800 at any time if they want to. And kind of the way the process worked, obviously the first step was the city ordinance. Then we ended up publishing a notice on the land records for each of these properties, letting potential, say, buyers of these properties know that there would be a future assessment on these properties once the work was completed. So that we've already done. At this point now, we are kind of following what the ordinance and state statute require. First steps being tonight, we're having the public hearing. The second step would be, once we have the public hearing, this board would consider the assessment. If that's approved, the notice of the approved assessment would be filed with the city clerk, would be published in the newspaper, and would be sent to each of the property owners. And the final step would be that kind of a certificate of assessment would be filed on the land records. It's basically kind of a contingent lien that NPU has. If one of these weren't paid, you basically have a lien to recover that payment at some future time. So things have gone very well. And I think, you know, assuming we get the approval tonight, we'll be on board and get these filed. Then, as I said, the assessments will actually start in October. My understanding, talking with Val and Laura, is that the plan would be that the assessment payment, which, you know, is, I think we're estimating around $17 a month, would just be an additional line item on the bill for that property.
I was just wondering, so, you know, it's over a 20-year period, so the assessment goes as a lien on the property, and because during that 20-year period, people may sell the property, pass away, and, you know, the concern is that, you know, collecting that amount is going to be difficult.
Right, well, it'd be a couple things. One would be, typically, like, if you have a sale of property, what happens with that lien is usually negotiated with the purchaser and the purchaser and the seller. I'll give you an example. Between the time we filed the initial notice of a possible future assessment and today, there was one of the properties that sold, and in that case, what was negotiated with the purchase price was that the purchaser insisted that the seller pay off the whole lien at that point in time. So that property is lien free. For these other properties, as those properties in the future, if they're sold, there might be an arrangement. Sometimes it'll be negotiated that the buyer will agree to take the property subject to the lien under the idea that it's kind of a long-term asset that they're getting some benefit out of for that period of time. Other times, it might be negotiated that whatever outstanding under the assessment, it's paid off at that time. That's really up to negotiation between the purchaser and buyer. In other cases, the typical way that especially liens like this that are collected would be at some point in the future, if payments were overdue and there was, there is kind of default interest that's built into it by statute, but if payments were overdue at the time the property was sold, there would be a requirement that that lien be taken care of before title transfers. Worst case, you could get to a point where, NPU legally would have the right to kind of enforce the lien and start collection actions. Again, it's $2,800 plus some interest, hate to say it, but by the time you hire a lawyer, that would be gone. So the typical action is that you would wait for a sale to occur and recover at that point in time.
I know the sewer settlement, some of that stuff fell through the crack of the property. So,
Correct.
so if there's any way, make sure that,
Well, as we're going through that process of fixing the sewer assessments, going forward, we have a cut and dry policy, not to let that happen again. And our team has come up with some great rules, policies to make sure that can't occur again. And this one here is the first new assessment since we've had that process.
Yeah.
and so the incentive to pay it off right away would be just to avoid that 2%.
Yeah, and the other thing, what the prepayment also allows is kind of the example I gave you before, is in case, say, someone sells their house in 3 years, and that new buyer says, part of the deal, I want you to pay off what's ever there, that you have that ability to pay it off. You don't have to pay it off over the full 20 years.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no more questions for Mike. Go ahead, Mike. Thank you. All right, with the presentations complete, I'd like to open up the public hearing of the Countryside Drive water assessment. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak either in favor or against this project? Okay. Is there anyone who would like to speak either in favor or against this project? Thank you, sir.
Your spot?
No,
Okay. Good evening. My name is Mark Perkins, and I just want to say some nice words. Okay. So on behalf of all of the members and board of directors of the Countryside Drive Homeowner Association, I'd like to convey our sincere thanks to the Norwich Public Utilities, its employees, and its board of directors for moving us to city water. So as Mary Lou was saying, we reached out to NPU several years ago, 2019, to discuss the possibilities. And from that time on, NPU just made it happen. You handle all the grants, funding, you made it affordable and with no burden to the Norwich taxpayers. So special mention and recognition to Mary Lou. Our homeowner association provided many challenges, and you had to wear many hats during the project. But you never gave up. And again, thank you very much for your extraordinary professionalism. And we probably owe you a case of Rolaids, I would imagine. So thank you. And I was going to mention Mark Decker, but we think we drove him out of here. He retired, so.
We'll forward that to Mark.
Jeff Brining, also, you were right on board at the beginning. Thank you very much. Chris, as always, you're always there, the skipper of the boat. Thank you very much. And just one thing I always tell people, and that is in Norwich, we have a couple of institutions that are really, really key. One is Norwich Free Academy, but the other is NPU. I mean, you guys are the gold standard of how a utility should be run. So how about a round of applause for yourselves?
All right, thanks, Mark. All right, are there any Any more people who would like to speak either in favor or against this project? All right, so again, is there anybody who would like to speak either in favor or opposed to this project? All right, hearing none, then I will declare this public comment period closed. And we'll move on to the rest of our agenda for the evening. Thank you. All right, agenda item 3 is a 15-minute public comment period. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak about anything in general concerning NPU? Are there any members of the public who would like to speak about anything related to NPU at the meeting? All right, Joanne.
This is work.
My name is Joanne Philbrick, and it's been a long time since I've been in this room, probably close to 5 years. I'm usually very self-confident, but I have to tell you that this is intimidating. There's a lot of power and a lot of money in this room. And it's uncomfortable, I'll leave it at that. A lot has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. We've had COVID, we've had Derbygate, we've had inflation, economic woes. But one thing that has been steadfast was what I always used to call the benchmark of NPU employees and how they responded to the public. I mentioned it many times to Mr. LaRose. I mentioned it to Mr. Bilda on occasion. Unfortunately, post-COVID, there appears to have been a shift in your customer service representatives. I called today looking for information on a particular subject. I called the number. It immediately went, no introduction, not press 1, not press 2. It immediately went to gas emergencies. The young man who was in the control room got a little bit impatient with me, and he said, do you have a gas emergency or don't you? And I responded, I was just trying to get a customer service rep. And he said, well, you got me. Do you have a gas emergency or don't you? And I said, no, I don't. So then he transferred me to the account representative, and I tried to ask, if you're looking for the agenda, it's like looking for truffles. You have to dig and dig and dig and dig. I asked her, how can I find it? And her name was Shannon, and she was, well, first of all, we don't have to publish our agendas. And I said, well, I do believe under the open meeting law that you have to. I said, so can you please help me find the agenda? Well, she put me on hold for probably 3 or 4 minutes and came back and then walked me through the process. Now, I admit I'm old. Technology is not my strong suit, but I managed to survive for 80 years without all of this. So she's trying to explain it to me, and she's talking so fast. And I said, could you please slow down? And she got really annoyed with me, and I thought, this is not what I'm used to with NPU. And finally I said, could I please talk to Mr. LaRose? And she goes, no. And I said, excuse me? And she said, no, you can't talk to him. You can talk to Mr. Riley. And I said, but I'm asking to talk to Mr. LaRose. She continued to tell me, no. And I'm being polite. And finally she said, okay. And she put me through to your voicemail, and you responded, and I appreciate that. But I think it's a new generation. I don't know if you have new employees, but they don't, and it's not just here, it's rampant in the city. You are all municipal employees, paid for, your salaries, your benefits, your pensions are paid for by ratepayers and taxpayers. We can all disagree, or we can all agree to disagree, but it's like in any of, the customer is always right even when the customer is wrong. So I would ask you to take a good look at that and just explain to the younger generation about customer skills. The second thing I wanted to talk about is Derbygate, and I know you're the water and sewer and not electric, but this is NPU. The three amigos or the three stooges, however you want to refer to them, have been tried, convicted, and sentenced. It is my opinion and that of many others in the community that it's time for NPU, you, to make a public statement and a public apologies to the taxpayers. None of those three have done it. And people are, a kind word, like this gentleman did, a kind word to the taxpayers, a brief explanation. This matter has been resolved with the fact, aside from the fact of restitution. But say something to the ratepayers. Say something. We're glad this is over. We can put this horse to bed. No, that's a poor choice of words considering the circumstances of the situation. But communication, please communicate with us. And the last thing I will ask you is when restitution is ordered, it cannot go, it needs to go back to the ratepayers, not those people that receive their bills paid by Norwich Human Services or TDCCA. It needs to go back to the people who actually footed the bill. So I don't know whose responsibility that will be, but we want to maintain the relationship and the image that is Norwich Public Utilities. I agree, it's one of the few shining stars in the city of Norwich. But right now, you have a little bit of an image problem with the fact that there has been, to my knowledge, no public response or no response from the powers that be in regards to the settlement of the whole thing. So we want to support you, but we also want open communication. So make it easier on the website to find. Even after all of that, we could not find the May 23rd meeting. We could find the April 25th meeting, but we could not find the tonight's meeting. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the open meeting law and how you have to post agendas and all of that in a timely fashion, or else you're in violation of the law. So again, I don't know if it's a technical issue or not, but again, like I said, there are members in the community who do not understand. Do you understand all this?
Some.
Okay. They ought to do a class at the senior center for those of us that are technologically challenged. But please, open communication. And again, with the staff, to just say, no, it's not the right answer. Mr. LaRose doesn't take phone calls from the public. Okay, well, that would be a discussion for another day. All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Pilgrim. All right, are there any other members of the public who would like to speak?
Yes.
Here we go. All right.
My name is John Jones. I live in an area where they did the water main. They had to run, because their original piping ran in the back side of all the houses that face Evergreen. Yeah, and the main ran in behind our house and in behind the houses on Laurel. They dug up from Evergreen, alongside the house, all the way into the backyard. Tie into the piping that's coming into the house. He said they'd repair the grass and everything. These pictures show that they never touched that property. I got dirt patches everywhere.
And there's stones.
It's gravel, it's not,
Little stones out
it's not
there.
topsoil. It's fill. You know, if you'd like to see them, they're right here. I can give them to this lady and she can let y'all look at it. I would like to see something better. if possible. And we're at 18 Evergreen.
All right, thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. for your
Thank
time.
you, sir. Yep. All right, are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? All right, one more time, are there any other members of the public this evening who would like to speak? All right, hearing none, I'll close the public comment period and we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is approval of the minutes, which was in your board package. I will entertain a motion. So we've got a couple, we gotta get to the comment, I think you got the motion first and then we'll have a discussion. All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So,
Thank you, Bill. All right. Are there any comments on the minutes?
I think the next regular meeting, the last sentence of the minutes should be 20th, right?
23rd, yeah, I caught that, yeah.
And then also on the agenda stays, the next regular meeting will be in June, right?
Yes.
Close.
All right, are there any additional comments on the minutes? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Are there any abstentions? All right, the motion carries and the minutes are approved. Agenda item 5 is the information and updates provided in your board packet. We have 2 this evening. We have the leadership team update. We'll start with first. Are there any questions or comments on the leadership team update?
I have, just a couple. Under the federal infrastructure investment, what was the issue with the funding that?
So by the week, when we put the application in for the funding, we hadn't started the project yet. By the time we received the funding, Groton had to start the project, so they procured the material, they hired the contractor, and it was too far along. They said, now you have to use the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund rules to use this money. And we had already gone past the ability to use that. So they allowed us, or we're in the process of getting allowed, to use that money for the sewer lining and doubling the sewer lining project from 800,000 to 1.6 million. So
It'll wash it off.
so we're going to get the same amount of money, and we're in the process of getting that done.
Any update on the sewer project?
That's why CDM is here for today's meeting. So Craig Wagner and Tim Dupuy will get everybody up to speed a little later in the meeting.
That's it.
What's that? Okay. Do you have any questions, Robert? No. Comments? Okay, I did not. All right, very good. Move on to the financial update. Are there any questions or comments on the financial update?
I just had one more. It was the gas expense analysis. It was over budget, $69,000 due to higher legal fees. What is the legal fees for?
We could look at that, there could be legal fees specific to the gas division or allocated legal fees across the entire organization. We have legal fees for a variety of different things, whether it be human resources, administrative.
It's all
something
into
like
that.
It's all part of that same, expense line.
Yeah, we're also getting extra capacity on the Millennium Project, and we have had our gas attorney looking into that. So that probably is the increase there.
That was it for me.
And we have set the cost of service workshop for the 29th, Laura, am I correct there? The 29th?
Yes,
Yeah,
June
June 29th. We'll do that from 2 to 6 p.m.
So is that just an educational session and then subsequently make decisions or?
So that is to understand the rationale behind the numbers, to have discussions on how we proceed, and then we'll have a public hearing for rates, and then we'll have a vote for rates. So the public hearing will probably occur in the July, August timeframe, and the vote will be in the September, October. So there is an opportunity to adjust and discuss possible changes.
Very good. All right, are there any other questions or comments on the financial update? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the Light Up Navajo update. And Chris, I understand there are 2 liners safely returned from Arizona. Who will give us an update on this great initiative?
So Eric McDermott is going to give us a little presentation on the work that was done. And I'm not sure if both are alive or returned, but we have one of them, Tom Holmes, here with us this evening. Actually, Jeff Burgess, I think, is getting his son's driver education training tonight or something. So
I didn't realize that we had to go through training for your kid to take the exam, but that's what he's doing.
Well, we're fortunate to have Tom here with us tonight. He can share a little of his experience.
Okay. I'd like to spend a few minutes tonight talking about Light Up Navajo, but Tom, as we just discussed, is actually the one that got to experience. So he's here to answer any questions that you guys may have. Next slide, please.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Here we go.
That's the slide.
Okay, we'll just move John here.
So before we get started on Light Up Navajo, I want to give a little background on the Navajo Nation. So the Navajo Nation is the largest reservation in North America. It spans 27,000 square miles across 3 states. It has 55,000 homes on the reservation. As of 2019, when Light Up Navajo started, 15,000 of those homes were without electricity. That means they did not have running water, they did not have refrigeration, they didn't have a means of cooking their food that didn't involve fire, no electricity whatsoever. That's 75% of all of the US's homes without electricity. 75% of the homes that are in the US today without electricity reside on Navajo Nation. Next slide, please. So to overcome that, APPA, the American Public Power Association, which we're a member of, teamed with the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority to try to get after this problem. What they came up with was Light Up Navajo. Light Up Navajo is a combination of grant funding through the Department of Energy and other sources that provide funding for materials and things of that nature, and APPA, public power utilities, providing the crews to run the wire and connect the homes. So there have been now, this is the 3rd iteration of Light Up Navajo that we've gone through. The first one was in 2019. Chris actually traveled out there, got to meet the utility, meet some of the people, got to look at the area that our crews are working. We sent our first crew in 2021. 2020 was actually canceled. We had set up to participate in 2020, and that was canceled. And I'm sorry, 2021 was also put off due to COVID. Our first participation was in 2022. In the 2 iterations prior to this year of Light Up Navajo, we had connected 267 homes to electricity for the first time. In order to do that, the nation is so sparsely populated. We're talking about running miles and miles and miles of line simply to connect just a few homes. That's why this is such a huge problem for the utility authority out there. Next slide, please. So Tom and Jeff traveled out there for 2 weeks. They just got back on Saturday, Sunday. While they were out there, they worked with 3 other utilities and 2 students to run over 4 miles of line and connect power to 5 new homes. Most of their time was devoted to running a line extension to a new community. As I said before, we're talking miles and miles of line just to get to a few homes. What you can see through the pictures here, the top picture, I included that
just as an idea of what the reservation looks like, this is actually a right of way that the guys are working on to install that miles and miles of line I just talked about. You can see there's nothing there. So you're talking miles and miles before they got to see even a couple houses. What you see on the lower picture, that's actually Jeff connecting the house. So you can see they've hung the transformer, they're running the secondary, they're actually getting to connect the house for the first time. That was one of the 5 houses that they were able to connect while they were out there. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's an awful lot of work just to connect those 5 homes. Next slide, please. So I did get to talk to Jeff and Tom when they got back. Overall, they had a tremendous experience out there. They got to work with a fantastic group of line workers from multiple utilities, and they gained an entirely different perspective of how you perform utility work in one of the harshest environments in the US. It's a completely different way to install lines when you're talking about very, very dry climate. Lightning, if any of you have been out to the Midwest and seen the lightning storm out there, it's really something to behold. But the electric lines that they're running out there have to be able to overcome all of that. So it's an entirely different way that they install lines and maintain those lines out there. What you can see here, the lower picture there, those are the crews that the guys actually get to work with all of that. Other than that, really, if you have any questions for Tom about what he experienced, I didn't get to go, but Tom's out there.
All right, so Yatahe, that means hi in Navajo. I got to learn that. That's pretty cool. So a little background about me. I've been in the industry for a little over 10 years if you count my Army time. And during that time, in my time here, I've done line work up and down the East Coast, everywhere from New Hampshire, Massachusetts, down to Puerto Rico, St. Thomas. I'm a certified instructor for the Army Lineman Schoolhouse. I've gone to the International Lineman Rodeo 4 or 5 times with the U.S. Army. But none of that could have prepared me for working here. We're talking about Puerto Rico, St. Thomas, even locally, restoring power, giving power back to people that have had it. Down there, it's a totally different story. You're talking to people that haven't had power for 21 years in the Wake Forest, 30 years in the Wake Forest. Their whole life, generations of natives that have been waiting for power forever. And it's such an important piece, it's a great mission to go out and do. When you see these kids and they're doing their homework by candlelight, kerosene lamp, headlamps, whatever they get their hands on. So you can only imagine how that affects their education. And during one of the appreciation dinners, they actually said, believe it or not, when you're at work here, probably save lives. Whether or not it was in the form of education or it was a form of somebody being able to get a refrigerator, for diabetic medicine or other medicines that need the refrigerator. And it's such a big project. Like Eric was saying, there's still 10 to 12,000 families that don't have power. You're talking about driving 30 miles from town, 10 miles down Barrett Road to get to one house, to get that one smile from that one kid that's never had power. And that doesn't tug on your heartstrings. I don't know what does. It's pretty amazing.
I also want to give Tom a little credit. In addition, to his work here, like you said, he is a reservist with the Army as a lineman, and he has also spearheaded his Army company going out to light up Navajo next year. So he's actually taken the company out there that will participate in light up Navajo and be able to do even more.
Yeah, so in the whole Army, there's only about 25 to 30 people that have my job out of about 750,000 people. With that, there's a lot of challenges, equipment and things of that nature. And we actually work directly for USACE, the United States Army Corps of Engineers. So we're trying to bring all 25 to 30 people to the Navajo Nation next year, renting about, I'd say, north of $250,000 worth of equipment, and get out there and try to make a big impact if we can. And it's also, going out there, doing these things is also very important for the NPU customer as well. Because while we go out there, we're learning, journeyman linemen never stop learning. It doesn't stop when we graduate medical school. So we get to learn tips and tricks from other linemen. We get to experience different culture, which in turn, we bring back all that knowledge back to North Connecticut, and we better provide for our own customers. And I think that's a big piece, great takeaway to think of.
Well, that's fabulous, Tom. Are there any questions of Tom or of Eric?
Any rattlesnakes?
Fortunately not. Wildlife wasn't so wild. It was all, cows, a lot of packs of dogs, like feral dogs. They said something about a couple mountain lions near a job site, but I never saw them.
Well, wasn't there a murder or something out there while you were?
There might have been. I mean, that's a pretty common occurrence. They have a lot of their own challenges out there with crime and unemployment rates sitting around 50%, I believe. There's a lot of different challenges that these people face, in the light of poverty and not having life essential services and even medical. Even medical is a tough thing because, you get sick and, you can drive 50 miles, you can drive yourself 50 miles, go to the doctor when you're sick. It's like, I don't know, it's a pretty tough area. It's very tough. And out of the whole world, they were saying that they had the second highest death rate due to COVID.
And so, underground utilities, would that work here or?
So they do have, actually they asked me about this, when they didn't do water. But, they do have water. Well, most of them do. If you don't have electric, good chance you don't have water. There's, you can bury underground water lines, but it's kind of unfeasible. So these families that don't have electricity, a lot of them are driving, 50 miles to town to NTUA to fill up a tank in the back of their truck, or, in some cases, they're still getting their water from the local river. So you have families that will walk to get their water every day just so they can shower, eat, brush their teeth. And they actually said that during COVID, while we're all fighting over toilet paper, they're fighting over bottled water at the local supermarket.
When you think of the essentials that you don't even think about, water, ice for your refrigerator, lighting, fuel, it is really amazing. And I know I got to see a house get turned on when I was out there, and Tom was fortunate to do 5 houses, but there are tears when you get your first light bulb in your house.
You're talking miles of line to get one house on. Never built line before. It's pretty tough. It's very tough digging. It's just, very hard work, but it's all rewarded in the end. So
Did you put in the poles and run the lines, or did someone else put the poles in ahead of you?
no, so we put the poles in. So this one right here, this is a previously energized line. So this was kind of one of the shorter projects. This only took 2 poles. So what we did is we ran a lateral tap off of this pole that we set, and we shot it across the street. I don't know if you can see it. I think it's kind of off in this direction here, but where a transformer was, and they were right off the main line, and it still took them years and years just to get connected because they need to file for a home lease through the federal government, and it's a very tough thing. A lot of paperwork, a lot of money, which a lot of people don't have in order to just apply for it. So.
But they do work it in sections, so in some cases, they were planting poles for the next crew coming behind them.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask you if you enjoyed doing this, or you enjoyed going out at midnight in a storm. I think you were clear on how fulfilling this was.
Oh, it was definitely fulfilling, and hopefully I get to go back in one way or another, either with the Army, and I'd like to go back.
Yeah, well, that's fabulous. Thank you very much. All right. Well, agenda item 7, Commissioner Goldblatt is unable to attend this evening, so we'll postpone that to the June meeting, and instead we'll hear from the Economic Development Committee. However, we are required to amend the agenda, so I will entertain a motion to amend agenda item 7 to be the Economic Development Committee. Well, do I have a motion?
Yep.
All right, I got a motion. Do I have a second? All right, thank you, Ed. First and a second, is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay.
So Sean is joining.
Sean is joining. All right. And are there any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. The agenda has been amended. Robert, you were going to say?
Well, I think this is going to be a pretty brief report because we're sort of between things. I think Chris has done, and his staff has done a tremendous job in getting some federal funds to do a number of important projects that we might not have always done. But we are looking to do a few things in the future that, aren't ready for immediate approval or whatever. But for example, we're going to be working with NCDC on the Maria development, which hopefully will get revitalized. It's been, my first job was at the Norwich Bulletin in the 70s, the early 70s. And I was covering a marina development plan then. So it does go back a little bit. But one of the things that has obviously happened is that we're going to be doing the sewer project. The sewer project is going to dramatically improve the cleanliness of the water and the odor from the sewer plant. There was an old joke back in the 70s about when they were going to put luxury housing there, that it was the confluence of the affluent and the effluent. But I mean, this is going to make a project much more feasible. And I think there are other things that NCDC can do to make it feasible as well. So who knows, it may revitalize the project. Secondly, I think that we're going to continue to seek a meeting regarding Preston Riverwalk to see how we can work in that project. We have the water and the sewer and the gas rights to that project. And we also probably have electric rights to the project, but that's less clear because Eversource has a sort of tie to that as well. I think what we want to do at some point is that the project moves further ahead and when Mohegan Tribe has a definite idea of what they're going to be doing, is to talk to them and see if we can work out some sort of a partnership arrangement that meets their needs and our needs. So that's another thing. There are some other projects, Business Park North is still out there, but that is sort of in limbo, right? Not in limbo, but they're seeking federal and state grants. They've got a large state grant to do the interior roads to include the cost of the utilities. They're seeking a federal grant that would allow the entrance ramp to 395 to be turned into an entry access for the entire park, which would virtually eliminate the need for any traffic on Canterbury Turnpike. And so those things are moving along, but there's nothing no big announcement I don't think we can make. Chris, is there anything
No, I think you captured it all. The one thing on Business Park North, the first grant covers utilities in the road that goes into the park.
Yes.
And that still has to be cited and everything else. But it also includes the utilities to get to the park. And we'll be working with NCPC in the July timeframe on getting that project started and how we're going to be able to access those funds. So we're going to be very busy with our internal crews getting that started.
All right, were there any questions of Robert? Economic development. All right, here we go. Thank you, Robert.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the CMEC update, which is myself. All right. All right, so last month's meeting in April, natural gas prices continued their march to normalcy with the Henry Hub price for the month of April at $2.35 per decatherm, and the Algonquin Citygate price at $2.84 per decatherm. Also, interestingly, April set a record for low demand in New England, beating the previous record set last year. Stephen Gould, ISO New England's Director of Operations, stated, quote, "The evolution of New England's power system continues. The previous record lasted less than a year, and this one likely won't last either. Each day, our system operators are seeing clean energy transition play out in real time." That was part of the energy update which was provided by Mike Sear. I'm not exactly sure what Stephen Gould was referring. I assume he's referring to solar power when he says that, or generation behind the meter. Okay, all All right, also at the meeting, the board was provided 2 slide presentations. The first from Richie Gaudet, who was the CMEC modeling and performance analyst, who walked the board through a discussion of weather prediction used by CMEC to predict load. Each successive slide of the demonstration showed the finer and finer grain analysis used by CMEC to predict the peak load hour for each month, used in part to deploy the behind the meter microgen fleet, whereby reduction of the peak load hour, just 1 hour, if you can capture that, for the month will provide savings for every kilowatt hour of that month. So accurately capturing the peak hour every month is very important to CMEC. Mr. Gaudet's presentation continued with further refinements of his model, including the transition to electric vehicles, heat pumps, and solar panels, demonstrating the significant error that will be encountered without these refinements. CMEC's peak hour prediction and hedging strategy depend on accurate load prediction, and Mr. Gaudet's presentation demonstrated the degree which it takes to include every factor. All right, the second presentation was provided by Jill Jerzyk, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Mike Johnson, who are rate managers at a company called United Financial Solutions, LLC. Ms. Jerzyk walked the board through a discussion of rate structures, focusing on dynamic rate structures that charge more during peak demand, or so-called time of use rates. Ms. Jerzyk stated that time of use is becoming the standard across the country, and this structure has several advantages for utility companies, including an improvement of system load factors, reduction of peak demand, and then it promotes electrification by further increasing the savings of electric appliances and electric vehicles that can be programmed to operate or charge at off-peak hours. Time of use rate require AMI metering, which NPU has. So I would ask that this issue be made an agenda item for a future meeting. Chris?
Certainly.
All right. All right, that's all I have. Are there any questions on the CMEC report? All right, hearing none.
Well, I was just going
Go
to add,
ahead.
I mean, one of the things that CMEC has decided to do and did on a special meeting of the board is to vote to not cover the legal costs of any appeal in the Kentucky Derby case.
Right.
CMEC was required by state law to cover the cost of the original trial. But once a decision is made, the CMEC is no longer required to cover those expenses. So I think that's important to understand. Secondly, I think just because of some comments that were made at this meeting, I think people ought to understand that not only the Norwich Public Utilities Board have no involvement whatsoever in the Derby events. All of us were appointed subsequent to when that occurred. We removed the previous general manager through a separation agreement with him. We changed our bylaws, and you know, again, we didn't approve anything involved with the Kentucky Derby trip. So I think that's just going to be on the record.
Well, thank you, Robert. I know that was important, and you've raised it at the special meeting as well, that the public perception, there's still a lot of people in the public that are angry with us that we didn't do more and basically get our hands tied in a lot of ways. It was interesting, at that special meeting, they said, we're going to do that. We're going to send letters to everyone saying we're not paying, and we will be subsequently sued. That's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So it's not a slam dunk just to say you send a letter to say we're not paying. Because believe it or not, the language in the statute is not clear. So, lovely. All right, thank you, Robert. Are there any other questions or comments on the CMEC update? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to strategic presentations. We have two this evening. The first being the sewer plant bid and the impact on water quality. Chris, who would like to speak on that issue?
All right, so Craig Wagner will be here to go over where we are and what our next steps are as far as the bid opening and some of the impacts on the water quality.
Oh, right.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chris. I'm Craig Wagner, City of Smith, here to talk about water quality in general, focusing on the water pollution control facility upgrade that is pending, and some of the things that are also related. So I love that shot of Alaska Island from the sky, but this one works too. This is, of course, Norwich from the air, where you get the Shetucket, the Atlantic, and of course, Norwich Harbor and things that were coming together. So tonight I want to give you some general background on water quality, some of which will be familiar to you, some of which you may not have heard before. So if any of it's helpful, that's my goal. Water quality in general, as many of you are probably aware, even today, we're way better off than everybody was 100 years ago. You know, we have sewers, we have wastewater treatment plants, we've got stormwater methods in place. But even though we're better than we've ever been before, we've still got a long way to go. Water quality in general is impacted by both point and non-point sources. I'll explain a little bit more about what those are. And the pollutants in general, we're looking at, it's actually a lot of things. It's physical things like sand, grit, silt. It's biological things like bacteria, nutrients that foster growth in the aquatic ecosystems. And it's trash and other things that get carried in from various methods. So point sources would include kind of what it says. It's a specific location where something is discharged. It could be the effluent pipe from the water pollution control facility. It would be outfalls from storm drains. It would be CSO outfalls, something that you can, you know, it's a point discharge. It's one place it's defined. And that is something that people tend to focus on, and it can be controlled because it happens in one spot. Also worth talking about, and a little harder to control, are the non-point sources. Storm drainage falls into both categories because it can come out of storm pipe, but it can also be overland flow. This is, you know, water flowing off a farmer's field and going down into the river over the bank. It's, you know, anything that is sheet flow overland, and we'll get into more what those things are. So I'm going to talk about a few things kind of in step. I'm going to focus on the treatment plant. I'm going to focus on some ongoing repair work. I'm going to focus on stormwater discharges and kind of talk about, kind of step through all the different things that are in impact here. But the treatment plant was already mentioned a couple times tonight, and I think it's worth just a moment to refresh. The treatment plant that you have, the oldest pieces of it were from the 1950s. Record drawings are dated 55. It was operational as a primary plant. It was expanded as a secondary treatment plant in the 1970s. But what that means is that most of the infrastructure you have, not everything, but most of what you have at that on Hollyhock Island, between 50 and 70 years old. You're talking about machinery and things that typically have a lifespan of about 20 years. So through diligent care and a lot of hard work, MP has kept that plant running for a very long time, but it's overdue for an upgrade. We're talking about repairing and replacing aged equipment, addressing changing permit limits and changing regulations, talking about nitrogen, which I'll get to in a couple slides, and doing upgrades to disinfection, reliability, SCADA controls, energy efficiency and safety, the ability for the plant to accept CSO volumes and flows, flood resiliency, and also as part of the process, closure of the adjacent Hollyhock Island landfill. So just a couple things, again, refreshing people's memory. It's been a few meetings more than a few meetings since I've been here to talk about it. But the plant is a front to back comprehensive upgrade, talking about increasing capacity to take more combined sewer overflow volume in the facility during the wet weather event. All new headworks, influent pumping, again for reliability, upgrading the existing primary systems, aeration systems, upgrading and adding more secondary capacity for settling at the tail end, removing hydraulic bottlenecks in the plant. It's been very challenging to even get sometimes 15 MGD through that plant because of the pipe sizes and the restrictions we have, let alone the pipes are from 1950s and are shot. So doing a lot of infrastructure upgrades throughout the plant. Anything you look at needs to be updated. And we're doing a whole new biosolids processing facility as well to update again the technology that was put there in the 50s. On the back end of the plant, new ultraviolet light disinfection. Currently you disinfect with a chlorine chemical product, sodium hypochlorite. It's effective, but not putting those chemicals into your effluent can be a good thing for the downstream ecosystems. So all new electrical distribution, again, new SCADA controls, effluent pumping, and flood protection so that you can be resilient and weather those big storms and keep running and getting that high level of effluent quality even during storms. Modern lab facilities, and again, closure of the adjacent landfill, which was closed in the early 70s, but not to today's standards. One more, Steve. So the key thing, there's a lot of keys. Reliability and running and always getting that good quality effluent is really what we're trying to achieve. One of the things that's helping us get good funding from the state is keying in on nitrogen. Nitrogen is, of course, the nutrient of concern in saltwater ecosystems. We're talking largely about the Long Island Sound downstream of the Thames, but the Thames is brackish all the way up through Norwich, so it impacts even your own backyard here. And the plant, I don't want to cast a bad light on it because the plant is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem was it was designed in the 70s. So with modern technology, we're going to take your effluent nitrogen loading, your ecosystem loading, from 12 milligrams per liter down to a little under 3, really cutting what you discharge in terms of nitrogen down to 25% of what you do today, which is impressive. That'll save NPU over $100,000 a year in nitrogen credits that you have to buy from the state. Again, UV disinfection, so no chlorine chemicals in your effluent, and just generally better quality effluent. Those extra secondary clarifiers we're adding are going to reduce the TSS and BOD that you discharge day in and day out, and all the while relieving provisions for a future, hopefully near future, but future adjacent CSO treatment facility. I feel bad, I can see that screen, but all of you are over here, so bear with me here. So relieving provisions for future CSO expansion. We're already expanding up to 20 MGD, which is an improvement. That little picture in the corner is our proposed, it's a ballasted flocculation facility. It's a fancy word for CSO, wet weather treatment. That would allow an additional 60 MGD to be processed at the facility for a total of 80. So when that comes online, that would be a big deal. So that's a couple notes on the treatment plant. We do come back to that at the end here. But I want to say that, and I tried to say before, there's other components of this too. There's a treatment plant which is important. There's also your ongoing efforts for inflow and infiltration reduction, with I&I in the wastewater industry, and cleaning and repair of your existing pipelines. They are dramatically helping. This cartoon here that shows a cartoon of all the different leaks, the common sewer system experiences. Leaky pipes, some pumps that might be connected, downspouts that might be connected, cross connections to storm drains. As you probably know, the city of Norwich has both separated sewers and combined sewers. So depending on the area, you get direct storm flow and flow. In some cases you don't, but you'll still get influences from old leaky pipes, which you and every other New England community have. So through the measures to fix the leaks and to remove sediment and debris from the pipes, your sewer division has seen really dramatic improvements in the last 5 years. It might be a little bit hard to see here, but basically in the last 5 years, Larry Sullivan has tracked rainfall and overflow volume. And rainfall goes up and down in a given year. That's variable. But the key statistic is for a given amount of rain that falls, how much overflow do you see? And this will continue to fluctuate some, but in the last 5 years, that's been cut in half. And that means for any given, if a wet year next year, you're gonna have more overflow. If a dry year next year, you're gonna have less overflow. Rain makes overflow. But having less overflow per unit rainfall is a good metric, and it tells a wonderful story for success for the money you've been investing in your system to fix those leaks and remove that debris that takes up your capacity. Why does it matter? Really lots of reasons, but one reason is sewage carries bacteria. When sewers overflow, the bacteria goes into the rivers. And at a higher concentration, a much higher concentration than any of us would want to see if we were swimming or doing any kind of contact recreation, even kayaking and getting splashed in the river. So, E. coli and enterococci are typical indicator bacteria. This is older data that I actually collected in Hartford from 2003 and 2004. But bacteria hasn't changed, sewers are still the same, they've been the same for decades or more. But what you see is the allowable levels are 5 to 10,000 times less than those discharges convey. So anytime we get more flow to the plant or clean pipes to let more flow get to the plant, that's a big deal, and that's a win. And that's kind of why that matters. So we talked about the plant, we talked about conveyance in your sewers, but it's also, I think, important to know that stormwater itself is a big deal. And the state knows this too. They've implemented their MS4 program statewide. Every town in the state is dealing with MS4 requirements to monitor and eventually probably to treat stormwater. But stormwater picks up everything that it touches, really. Road, sand, salt, construction site sediment, or any sediments from, it might be on somebody's property, fertilizers and pesticides, animal waste, whether it's birds, dogs, humans out there, oil and grease, and litter, soda cans, whatever might be lying around, all gets washed in to your storm drains, which go right to receiving waters without treatment. And it's not you, it's not just you, it's not just your yard, it's your neighbor, it's your community, it's your city, but it's also the communities upstream. You're on the Yantic, you're on the Shetucket, your neighbors upstream, their stormwater are going to continue to impact you, and collectively you and they are going to impact downstream communities. So, I guess the things you all probably knew, but everybody's got to pitch in, and it all matters. It's not just CSOs, it's not just the effluent from the plant, although every piece of this matters, and it's all going to make a difference. I'm not going to go through this, but if someone gets the handouts, you can take a look. These are all the common stormwater pollutants from a lead and nutrient standpoint, and some of the common places they come from. And I'm sure you can make this available to let people look at it. Some of the things like, oh yeah, I got those, So where do we go from here? I guess certainly questions are welcome, but I just want to say, I said at the beginning, the treatment plant upgrade is pending. We have a bid in hand. We are reviewing the bid, working through the process of getting ready to award that with NPU and the state. It's a process we're still in the middle of, but no red flags so far. Things look favorable, and certainly from a lot of different perspectives, we'd like to see that go forward. Next steps would be to finish that review and report back to NPU and the state. We need to have meetings with the DEEP to talk about funding and their steps for award. They have to approve award of the project. We would recommend, we need to revisit the CSO long-term control plan. It was developed and submitted initially in 2018. And as all of us have seen going through the pandemic, the economic picture that many communities had in 2018 is different than you have now. Material pricing, even labor availability, there's been a long list of things that have changed, and we need to capture that in modern current economic conditions. And that affects affordability and pricing of those proposed improvements. But I'd say that the wet weather treatment facility at the plant and the Rose Alley pumping station upgrades they've always been proposed as the next steps immediately after the treatment plant, and that would still make sense. They convey so much more water to the plant for treatment that it would make a lot of sense to maintain there, but we need to look at the timing of things. Any questions?
Craig, you were saying that you're using UV as opposed to chemicals. That's for the regular part of the plant, but the wet weather train, I thought you used for chemicals, or do I have that backwards?
So the treatment plant proper, like the main facility that treats 20 MGD,
Right.
yeah, so that'll be upgraded to UV disinfection. So there'll still be small quantities of sodium hypochlorite on site, but not for disinfection, not for the effluent.
Okay.
The wet weather facility has yet to go to design, actually. And there's a couple of choices based on footprint and economics. Hartford, as an example, uses chlorine for wet weather discharge disinfection. Other facilities use UV. And, I think they're both still in the process for that. But it would be only during rain events.
Right, right. And that wet weather train has 3 times the capacity of the regular plant? Yeah. Okay, and it's only comes on when you have a big storm, that's what it's there for.
Yep, so anytime the flow exceeded 20 MGD, you'd see the wet weather train kick on. So, you know, it's tough to run it at one, you may choose to send, you know, yeah. So you'd see up to 60 more, so 80 total going to the island.
Okay. So with the wet weather train, we can close all CSOs on upstream.
Well, I wouldn't recommend closing them. It's designed per DEEP's requirement for a 2-year level of control, which means more than a 2-year storm, you know, a bit, you know, 5 or 10-year storm or hurricane, you're still going to see activations at some of your larger ones like Rose Alley. You'd probably never say never, but it's unlikely.
Okay, so they remain open, but they wouldn't overflow every storm.
Because when you have that large storm, they go into basements versus, you know, when it backs up. That's what you're, want to avoid.
Statistically, you'd see an activation every 2 years.
Okay.
So far and few between versus now, every major rainstorm.
Every storm we get CSO that are discharging.
Right.
So, are there any questions for Craig?
Well, are we gonna talk about the bid too, or is that?
So it's just about, review.
Yep.
And then we have to go on to the affordability analysis and get deep approval.
Okay.
Well, then when we have real numbers, we're gonna be back in front of the board. We'll talk about what impact the rates and what the affordability is gonna be. And then we're gonna have to make some hard decisions. And we may have to push back a little bit on getting maybe higher percentages of grants. And, you know, we're a distressed community. And I think we are, you know, we are a prime candidate to get additional funding. But we don't know where we are yet. And we're still working on getting those numbers.
Yeah, in that regard, I've said this before, but we are the number 2 distressed community in Connecticut, according to the State Department of Economic and Community Development. So that's a factor. But the other factor, it seems to me, is that the sewer system is not universal in Norwich. There are areas that have septic systems and are not tied into the sewer system. And I think that if you look at the way the city has evolved, the middle and upper class folks used to live in areas that were served by sewers. And there's been a gradual shift to the outlying areas of Norwich that are not served by sewers, but are rather served by septic systems, which would mean that if you look at just Norwich's economic status, it's not outstanding. But if you then say, well, let's eliminate the affluent areas that have septic systems, and let's only focus on the economic capacity and status of people who are served by sewers, it's even worse.
Yeah. So Tim, could you maybe talk a little about economic justice and
Sure.
how that impacts some of these funding?
Sure. One of the things that is a primary, I'm Tim Dupuy with CDM Smith, for those who don't remember for a bit. But EPA is making a cornerstone of their recent push on funding, trying to make environmental justice areas a focus of it. And certainly those areas that you were just describing would be prime candidates to potentially be available for additional funding. Some other states have prioritized those areas and given them additional percentages. You're seeing quite a bit of it with the lead programs that you're seeing out quite a bit now. So first focus is to try to support those communities with funding and priorities. So, and for the CSO plan, one of the things we did do as well on the affordability analysis was go down by census block to do exactly what you said. So it's not just taking all of Norwich, it's the census blocks that are in your sewer service areas, and then we're able to recalculate the affordability percentage there. So we'll do the same thing.
Great.
All right, were there any additional questions of Craig or Tim? More to come.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it. All right, and our second strategic presentation was efficiency programs. Chris, who was speaking on that?
Jeff Riding will give us a presentation on this, and I think this is a good problem to have. We have too many people taking advantage of our rebates and incentives, and we're gonna have to do a little adjustment, but Jeff can go right into the details of where we are and where we are going.
Great, thanks, Chris. I'll just have my back, I'm gonna see from here, if that's okay. It's the first presentation with readers. I can't be in denial any longer, so. All right, next slide, please. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about just the financial overview at a high level and then what are driving some of the adjustments that we're going to talk about. Our residential home energy savings program, which has been very popular throughout energy efficiency programs, which actually started back in 2006. I've been involved since that was implemented in that time frame. Our CHIP program, which is it's interesting because this is something where, again, one of our program goals is to bring value to our customers. It also increases load, which brings value to all customers as well as the customers who are participating, some of whom were in this room. So that's kind of a win-win there. Insulation, which is self-explanatory. We'll talk a little about commercial industrial customers. Again, energy efficiency programs are driven by technology, also driven by customer behavior and customer education as well. But that's an always space where that's always changing as well. Cool choice, that's commercial level air conditioning. Natural gas, something we talk a little bit less about lately, but still actually very strong participation and interest in our natural gas program. And we continue to tie in new natural gas services, several dozen a year. So that's good to hear. Energy Star appliances and electric vehicles and charging stations, which I still mentioned a bit about earlier. The next slide, please. So this graph here shows basically our total fund balance. I'm not going to get into different funds, but some are collected through rates, others are regional carbon auctions, and some are payments we received from the ISO from the efficiency work that we've done over the years. So that continues to increase as well. This just so happens to go from April of 2020, which, if you remember, is right about when we shut down, as a nation from COVID. A lot of things shut down with that, right? Availability of contractors, people's comfort with them being in homes and businesses. So we begin to build a fund balance, and that went up over time. As we came out of COVID, and that comes through March of 23 on the right-hand side, don't be fooled by the little blip on the up. The popularity of these programs has skyrocketed. That's a good thing. It's a good thing for our customers. It's a good thing all the way around. However, we're in a position where we need to make some adjustments, otherwise we're going to run out of money. And again, if you look at the intention of rebates and incentives, is exactly that. It's to help enable customers, all customers, to make the right choices to save themselves money on their energy bills. So you'll also see the incremental costs of a lot of these technologies is coming down. Next slide. All right. So I talked about the home energy savings program. A lot of things happen here. This is administered through a third party, Lantern Energy, and basically they come to your home. Any of you who have participated in this, they actually put a blower fan in the door to draw air into the home so they can see where air may be leaking in. 60% of your energy cost in a residence can be from air leaking in from outside, or air infiltration. So that's a big deal. So sealing up those air leaks, sealing up ducts for people may have forced hot air heat. Still replacing, there are incandescent bulbs out there still that are getting replaced with LEDs. So good to finish out, close the book on that. Installation of hot water pipes. And, you know, this comprehensive kitchen table discussion, most valuable thing that they do when they do a home visit, and that is educate the customer. So you can go in, you can do a lot of things, but if the customer understands why they're being done, it helps them be a steward to keep things, you know, in their home or residency operating in an efficient manner. And also some additional things that can be done, maybe above and beyond the services that we're providing here. So again, extremely popular. We'll be instituting a $50 copay. This is about a $1,200 value on average for a home. So it's a very small portion of the expense. But what that does is kind of just a little bit of making sure that, okay, yeah, I do definitely want this, I do definitely need that. So the change will be making there.
You pump anything there right away or no?
Yes. Everything we're talking about tonight is good. Think first. Okay, the CHIP program, which is our cooling, heating, and center file program. Heard a lot about that here over the past couple of years. Extremely popular, approaching 200 completed systems, over 600 interested. You look at the leadership team update. The team has done an exceptional job managing that internally and providing support to our customers. We're going to be changing that to $1,200 per ton. So that's still a significant, the average residential system maybe about 3 tons. So you're still covering 30 to 40% of the cost. And we're at $2,400 at one point. Again, our intention with that was to prime the pump, if you will, with the technology, get enough systems out there that people see the value of it, then it kind of takes off on its own. So that's why we need to make that adjustment. We are limiting it to 80% of project cost. There are some situations where homeowners have the ability to put these systems in themselves, which is wonderful. But we do want to make sure that we're not upside down on those incentives. And then on the these systems, you see a lot of them going into multifamily properties and commercial properties. So that's where the $20,000 per customer cap comes in. And you'll hear me mention a couple times 50,000, all programs as a whole. So if you're a business per se, it's 50,000 total for that business for a period of 2 years. Right?
That's from us.
From us.
Not to be confused with the tax benefits that now exist.
Correct.
From the federal government, which are very significant as well.
When you start adding all this together, it covers a significant, it sounds like a lot of countryside project, right? Where grant funding is covering a significant government project. Insulation rebates, again, one of the most cost-effective investments you can make in your home or business. We do $1.50 square foot for attic insulation in rises, right? That's a logical place to have it. $1 for wall. We do not require an HES audit. We do recommend that. There's a lot of information here. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. $8,000 cap per location. I'm going to continue to mention that $50,000 cap. We know what that's for. And $2,000 cap per unit for multifamily. So we get a lot of multifamily properties that take advantage of this as well. Commercial industrial customers. So one of the interesting things is specialized manufacturing equipment. So the old Plaspac or Nordson now, they went from hydraulic or electric presses to direct electric presses. And that saves like 25% on the energy consumption of that press. It was cutting edge technology in the industry, but we help partner with them to implement those initial machines and help them be competitive. I mean, they manufacture plastic widgets, send them to China, rather than the other way around. I'd love to tell that story for that reason, coming from Norwich, right? So that's a good thing. We are having a 25% incremental cost, so this will be if if you're going to a more efficient technology and equipment, that's down from 50%. Again, more in line with where things are at this point. Again, 20 and 50,000. I'm not even going to mention those anymore, but you'll see those on each program as we go New construction, major renovation, same thing, going 50% to 25% on that. As these top technologies become more mainstream, the incremental costs become less. We can spread our dollars further, help more customers, bring value to more customers. And that's really what we're doing. Next slide, please. This is tiny. Okay, so one of the things that we're doing to make sure that we're being equitable across all rate classes, as you're familiar on the electric side, it's the easiest way to understand. We have three main rate classes. ESC being small, that's kind of your mom and pop stores, for lack of maybe a real estate office, something like that. Mid-size EC would be grocery store or something like that, and then large would be our hospital or ACLS or CSC or something like that. So essentially what we did is adjust the caps. The percentages will be the same, but the caps are adjusted respectively. I'm not going to walk through every single one here, but they're adjusted respectively because funds come in on a per kilowatt hour basis. So the more energy you use, the more you're contributing to the funds, plus the more expensive your upgrades are likely to be. So we just want to make that equitable across the customer base that way. And this is very similar to other programs with our municipal partners and industrial utilities as well. Next slide. Variable frequency drives, that stays the same. We'll have a lot of those at the wastewater plant. You guys are gone, but as we go forward, one of the most efficient ways to improve the performance of pumps and things like that, electric motors, for the variable frequency. No change. Full choice rebate, as I mentioned earlier. Now you'll notice the per ton cost or rebate is lower than our CHIP program. This is for units such as the heating and air conditioning unit that's cooling this room right now. That has a cooling component to it. We don't see homeowners doing much of this anymore because it makes so much sense to participate in our CHIP program. But there are, again, incremental efficiency gains that can be made on these units, generally at the time.
Can we go back to the CHIP program for a second? My understanding is that these sorts of units are efficient down to about 20 degrees. And when you go below 20 degrees, they lose some of their efficiency. And at that point, it might be more efficient to use an old heating system or is that basically
So
right?
it's a great question. It's a couple of things. Recent advances in technology,
Yeah.
they will operate down to 10 below zero, which is essentially your design day here at Southeast Connecticut. So the good news is you always have adequate heat. We have talked with people that we know that have these systems, both locally here in the community and also outside the community, and to see how people made out. So that's the home run. You're completely correct that once you get down below 30 or 40, the efficiency starts to drop off. Maybe that tipping point is around 20 degrees. So if you'll notice here, we have a $2,000 rebate for controls. And what those integrated controls do, if you do have a functioning system that runs on a different fuel and you want to integrate it so that the heat pump works really about 95% of the time, and the other 5%. Now, honestly, the savings aren't enough to justify maintaining or especially installing that additional system, if that makes sense. However, if you have it, a lot of what we find too is that people being comfortable with this, right? So you want to make sure, hey, I know it's working for other people, I want to see it work for me. I have a functioning oil boiler, let's say. We help you cover the cost of that control, set it up so it's the most efficient. It'll kick over to the oil if it needs it. After a year or two, you realize you don't need it, it probably doesn't. But so I appreciate you bringing that up because that's a key point. It's a little different than a geothermal system, which still has, it uses groundwater, so your temperature is constant.
You're still going to give $5 there, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's worth 10 myself. All right, where were we? Yeah, natural gas. Let's talk about natural gas. So again, natural gas is a program. This has just been chugging along for years now. And you recall we grew our customer base and load by 25% between 2012 and 2016. And these rebates remain on par with the incremental cost difference of different equipment that's out there. And again, just to remind everyone, natural gas equipment has an extreme competitive advantage over other fuels such as it can simply operate safely at a higher efficiency than they can. It's just because of the way the combustion works. So, like I said, we continue to have a significant interest in this program. It's not quite as talked about as much as chip or EVs or some of the other things right now, but it's still, you know, for business. Slide. Energy Star appliances, pretty self-explanatory. Energy Star is a federal rating of units just to show which ones may perform better than others. And you also have window air conditioners in there, a lot of window shakers in the community. Every little bit helps. So every little bit that we can help our customers save helps them on their bottom line. And that's even a heat pump dryer. We have a couple of these. A dozen of them or so installed at this point. But it is literally heat pump, like a little chip unit. It dries your clothes. And the amazing thing about this is because it recycles the heat, you don't need a dryer. So really popular with, you have no external vent. You have a filter to take the lint out, but it's a closed loop. There's no need to get air to an outside wall. Really popular in multifamily, right? Because sometimes this construction makes it very difficult to get this outside wall. So, you know, it's another neat technology, and we're trying to introduce our customers as many of these technologies as we can. All right, and electric vehicle chargers for the vehicles themselves, and as well as the chargers. Those remain unchanged. Again, this is one of those things where NPU is fully prepared to support electric vehicles and charging as they become available and as they grow in popularity in the community. One of the things that we're seeing here, this is why our rebates and our NPU's focus is really around 3 levels of charging. Level one is you plug in with an extension cord. Really not practical for a vehicle that's going to go more than a couple of miles in the day. The next is level 2, which is the largest you can really have in your home. That's what the majority of the charging is. And as we're learning more and more about electric vehicles, the priority having a charger at your residence, charge overnight, takes 4 to 6 hours. You know, again, it depends how far you're driving and that sort of stuff. Our level 3 chargers as well, which work at 480 volts, and you can have 3 or 4 Teslas in front of ShopRite and Walmart. Those 3 or 4 Teslas are pulling more than that entire complex when they're charging at their max rate. So that's designed to be more of an emergency, top it off, that type of thing. So for us as a utility, looking how we can best support our customers, that level 2 is really the sweet spot, and of course the vehicles themselves. So that's why we're staying with the rebates unchanged. Next. That's it.
So to make sure we're keeping the programs moving along, some of the investor owners will take the money, and when they run out of money, they stop doing all the money. We're trying to just throttle it down a little bit, and then making it so we don't get in a bad financial situation, and has to continue to help people all year long.
So the funding here comes into the efficiency program, that's on the bill.
On the bill, correct.
We're putting up all these basic incentives of all kinds comes from the money collected in the bill.
Yes. It's less the investor owns, but we have less overhead for the investor owns. So more of our money is staying here and directly impacting and helping our customers.
I think it's important too that, at first blush, if you look at some of this, some of the energy efficiency things and so forth, your reaction might be, well, they're trying to put themselves out of business. They're doing things for users that will reduce the demand. And there's some truth to that, I suppose. But on the other hand, a lot of the other things, like facilitating the conversion to electric cars and the charging at home, or chips, or all of those sorts of things, are essentially pushing for new technology that's going to use electricity to be adopted. And that's sort of sustaining our community.
And a big part of this is business retention. So when we do save a business money, they can grow, they can, they can improve their business and their bottom line. So that piece is there, but also, especially with this chip program and the electric vehicles, growth is is a great goal to have.
Well, thank you. Yeah, every customer we can get off heating oil and gasoline was helpful to us. So then we would sell them either gas or electricity. All right, thanks, Jeff. Are there any questions of Jeff on the incentive, on the efficiency programs? All right, here we go. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 10, which are action items, and tonight we only have one, I believe, which is to consider a resolution on the Countryside Drive water assessments, of which we heard earlier. Presentation. We have a resolution, or we had a resolution, and I will entertain a motion to approve the resolution on the project as described tonight.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Robert. A second, Bill. All right, thank you. First and a second. Is there any discussion on this water, the Countryside Drive water assessments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Chuck?
I heard Sean.
He's not there.
Is he on?
No, I think he dropped off.
All right. All right, all those opposed say nay. Are there any abstentions? All right, the motion carries, the resolution is approved, so congratulations. Thank you. All right, agenda item 11, other business. Is there any business to come before this, any additional business to come before this board this evening?
Did you look into the training that I mentioned?
Yes.
All right. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. All right. I have a first and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. And thanks to all the members of the public who came tonight. Thanks for all the presentations. Appreciate it.